Hi, and welcome back to Sisterhood in Surgery. Today is our season finale for this year until we come back, I think in August. And today we have a very special guest. Our topic is how social media has positively impacted physician moms' work-life integration. And my co-host Palma Shaw, who will start with the introductions. Remember, this is a live show, so you can join by web. Go to pollev.com, enter DeBakey, or join by text and text DeBakey to 37607. Palma? I can't hear.
So many months to have this webinar and hold it with very well recognized women leader, Dr. Hala Sabry, who's a board certified emergency medicine physician. She's a feminist leadership coach and founder of the Physician Moms Group. She's also a super mom of 5 with 2 sets of twins. She balances her career in medicine with roles as a mother and entrepreneur, and found that to be initially challenging. She frequently fought fear, negative self-talk, and a recurring desire to quit. And she knew other busy professional women, working mothers, must have experienced the same struggles. She created the Physician Moms Group 7 years ago to offer emotional availability and support to women like her, that now supports over 116,000 members. She expanded her outreach to coaching individuals and consulting businesses. She offers high-performance coaching to professional women in male-dominated professions who feel unseen and unheard in the quest to develop their personal brand and become a confident thought leader. Hala is a tenacious advocate for ending sexism and promoting gender and racial equality in the medical field. She believes that as a community leader, she has a responsibility to forge a path for other women and to elevate her other fellow physician mothers. She has collaborated with leading Fortune 500 companies and international organizations to further her work, advocating for women physicians, patients, and children. Welcome, Hala.
Thank you for having me. I do feel like we've been talking about this for months.
Yes.
So I can't believe this day is actually here.
Well, we are so excited to have you. You're a celebrity in our eyes. So how did your journey start? I know we talked about this a little bit a few months ago, but how did it begin as you being a mom, a busy physician? So what prompted you to develop that support group for physicians, moms? And it started off as, I think you said 20 members, and now it's over 116,000 members. How did you make that happen?
Yeah, you know what's so funny is that number is like not, I think it's 130,000. I think
I
gave you that bio a long time ago. But you know what's so funny is that, how did it start? It started with a man telling me no. That's how it started. If anybody has known me for any part of my life, they know that leadership has been something super important to me. I was, class president of my class. I was chief resident. I was house staff president. I did my MBA while I was in medical school. I mean, I love business and I love leadership like so much. And so that's what I did. I just kept raising my hand. And, a lot of people thought it was strange because they're like, oh, physicians really don't want these leadership positions in general, not just women, but they kind of just want to do their work and go home. So when I was a fresh attending, those are the questions I was asking in my interview. Like, what is the advancement opportunity? My goal is to be a CEO of a hospital. So to do that, I need to know how different committees work. I need to understand the operations management of a hospital and things like that. So there, a lot of I got every job I applied for. They were just like, oh, you seem really interested and we're not. So, let's bring you on so we can, have you, represent us, in these committees. So that's what I did. And, my second year out, I had my first kid. And ironically, while I was on my maternity leave with her, a job opportunity opened up to be a quality director, which was the next step for me. And so I thought the next email that was going to go out was and Hala was chosen. Because literally nobody else ever wanted to do anything in my group. So who are you going to choose, right? But apparently they found someone, and they found another man. That was my junior that I recruited to the site because I was trying to grow our team as well. And so when I went back to work after the whopping 5 weeks I took off because, I didn't want to rock the boat, and I was the only woman with kids in the group and things like that. I said, well, why was I not, considered? And they said, well, you just had a baby. And I was like, yeah, but you have kids. And the guy that they chose had a young kid. Like, so why is it okay for you guys to be leaders and be parents, but it's not okay for me? And so I basically had what I call an F it attitude. I was like, forget it. I'm not going to do anything. I want to leave medicine. I think that's a normal reaction sometimes that we have to failure or obstacles. Like we kind of throw our hands up in the air. And so literally I just gathered 20 women to figure out how to leave. Like, how do I leave medicine? Like, I felt like I couldn't because I invested so much time. And I felt like I couldn't because I still had school loans. And in my brain, that like, you know, that was like a mortgage, right? So big. And I was like, well, what am I going to do? You know? So I gathered these 20 women and they were like, we don't know, girl. We don't know what you're going to do, but we've all been there. And so they're like, and can I add a friend? And I was like, okay, sure, yeah. So, had I known it would be this international organization of over 100 countries represented, I probably wouldn't have done it at the time because I was already so overwhelmed and just really, I don't know, just discouraged, you know? So I'm glad he told me no, because it just caused a revolution of women in medicine, I think.
I mean, we've all been there, whether or not we've had the courage to speak up or not. But I think every one of us has probably had some experience where we felt overlooked and sort of, you know, not, you know, shafted in a way because we didn't get what we deserve, even though we're qualified for that job. But that's great that you turned a negative thing into, you know, a super positive and motivating, you know, and shared it with all of us, actually, the physicians, women's, and like the whole nation.
Yeah, I mean, but like you said, like I'm just one story. I mean, everybody has a story. And maybe it's a little bit different than mine, but it all ends the same. Someone underestimating you because you're a woman, or just assuming that you're not interested, assuming that, you know, wanting to spend time with your kids or deciding to have kids somehow is negative. It's a negative thing. But we don't do that to a man. If a man decides to have kids or is like, hey, I need to take an extra week off to be with my newborn, we're like, oh my God, you're such a good dad. That's so sweet. A woman does it and they're like, oh gosh, how long is she going to draw this out? You know, is this going to be a thing? Is she going to go part-time? We don't do that with a man, you know? So I think it just really highlighted, you know, sexism. And I think the conversation that I think that I'm trying to have really is we're kind of told as women, like, hey, just wait, like, you know what? We're accepting more women in medical school. Eventually, you know, in the next decade, we're going to have over 50% of doctors being women. But, and that's great. And I'm all for that. And while people are doing all the good work and doing that, the work that I want to do is focus on equity, because you can try to push towards equality all you want, but we can have equity now. And if we don't have equity now, I'm sorry, but we're not going to have equity later. We're just going to have more people that are with inequity, right? And so we know this in health disparities, we see this in racism, we see this in so many other examples. So I think for me, you know, the reason why I wanted to be a hospital CEO was because, you know, I saw my dad was also an emergency medicine physician, and he really wanted me to go into medicine. And I couldn't understand for the life of me why, because he'd come home and complain every single day. I mean, this is like the 90s and, you know, early 2000s, and he would complain about insurance companies and administrators making decisions for doctors that were really harmful to the doctor-patient relationship or to patient care, because they're looking at numbers, you know, and doctors are trying to explain, you can't run this like any other business. Like this is unique. This is lives. We're not talking about serving food or like some other service industry. Like this is, you know, life and death. And sometimes people, you know, in recovery or, you know, through the hospital system or whatever it may be, they don't react exactly how we expect. You know, they need more time, they need more resources. So I remember telling my dad, like, why would you want me to be a doctor when you're so miserable? And he's like, it's not that I'm miserable, I just don't know how to change it. And, you know, everybody, you know, in his generation, like they're like, at this point, they're like, you know, we're old and we're tired. So we're going to pass the baton to you guys, and maybe you guys will be smarter and have more energy to do it. So I literally thought the way I could change medicine was being a hospital CEO, because in my brain, that was like the highest power, right? Like that's all I could see. Like that's like the president, right? Like, so I'm like, if I could just be in that position, I can really advocate for doctors. But by that boss telling me no, who's a really good friend of mine now, you know, I mean, I'm glad we both like learned and grew. But by him telling me no, I actually got to do something much bigger, because my audience would have been just that one hospital, possibly, maybe the neighboring hospitals around there. But now my audience is the world, right? So it's so much more fun. It's so much more impactful. No offense to anybody that's a hospital CEO watching this. I'm sure your job is amazing too. But you know, the number of emails I get from women physicians or dentists or pharmacists, other industries, lawyers reaching out to me going, hey, because you started this group, I'm starting this group for our industry. It's more of like a revolution of women in these male dominated fields saying, hey, listen, like we can all achieve equity together. And if we do that, our collective legacy will be, you know, really changing the conversation and the worth that women have, you know, now, and not waiting until some promised future.
Hala, it's interesting that you say that, because just recently we had a very big vascular meeting, and this year we started the women's section for our largest society here in the US. And I'm one of the co-chairs of that. And, you know, we're struggling with this whole equity piece, because it's exactly what you say. Whenever we're up for committees or leadership roles at executive leadership level, someone will say, oh, you have that for the other society. You really can't juggle two. But the men, no one questions them. There's numerous men with executive leadership roles in different vascular societies. No one ever thinks twice that they can't handle it. It has to be that, oh, well, that woman, well, she needs to do one at a time, you know, because she's a mom and, you know, maybe she can't handle that. And it's a pervasive concept. And, you know, we're struggling to have equity in our society right now, because there's quite the glass ceiling moving up into the leadership. There's many women working committees and chairing committees and doing phenomenal work who have to wait in line, just like you just said, to move ahead. And when our group is only about 16% women, if you have a voting, right, we're never going to be at the top, right, if it just goes by vote. So how do you propose we achieve equity as female physician surgeon moms when the leadership is still kind of keeping us down and the vote isn't going to get us there? I mean, what would you see as a way around that to achieve equity?
Yeah, I mean, if I have the answer, then this wouldn't be a problem. I think we're all collectively trying to find the answer. But, you know, I remember really early on when Physician Moms Group first was created. And remember, I created it, you know, out of very selfish reasons to try to figure out how to get out of medicine. But, you know, the brilliant minds in that group, you know, have proved other resources and other reasons why this group exists. And, you know, eventually, you know, I caught on, right? But, you know, one of the women in the group, actually, there was like a group of 11 or 12 of them who are physician scientists. And they proposed that we make a research team for PMG for this exact reason. They're like, hey, listen, the only way to change anything, whether it's in medicine, if it's public policy, if it's public health, whatever it may be, is having data, you know? So they proposed that we do a survey study in our group about, you know, to kind of survey how many of us, how many of us experience discrimination. And I was like, okay, I'm not a scientist. I am not in academia, but this sounds really lame. Like this, but okay, fine, let's do it, right? So we do the study, and the study shows that 90% of the people who took the survey have experienced some type of discrimination because of being a woman or choosing to be a parent, or maybe their age. And so there was like multiple, you know, cross sections of discrimination there. Now I was like, okay, I got this result, and I'm like, what are we going to do with it? So they went ahead and they wrote it up, and JAMA picked it up. And I was like, okay, like, I'm not really sure. This is not that exciting because it's my lived experience. I'm like, yeah, this is like telling the obvious, right? So they publish it, and it gets like tens of thousands of views. Okay. And there's a media blitz around it. There's Forbes writes an article, like a huge thing. And I'm like, I'm still flabbergasted that just getting one piece of data out there would cause such a big stink, basically. But what happened a couple of years later, 4 years later, I got a call from the ACGME saying, hey, we want to invite you to this task force. We're going to be discussing changing parental leave. And at first I didn't really understand why I was invited, because literally it was like 2 people from each society and then me from a Facebook group, So I was like, all right, I'm there. And then as they were telling the story of how this came about, I think that people knew that this parental leave policy for trainees was so unfair, and it really penalized women, or anybody who wanted to have a family and actually, take some time off to be with them. And we're talking about 6 weeks. We're not talking about a year off, even though I think that's what we probably should have. And so it started this icebreaker of a discussion, like, hey, here's data now. Now what are we going to do with it? And then, a couple of years later, they actually changed the policy. And yeah, they don't, the ACGME doesn't have any jurisdiction over me or you anymore. But that's just one example of how we can actually change the current structure that's set up, that is inequitable. And so I say, there's so many ways. I think being persistent, speaking up, continuing to speak up, getting more people to understand, the he for she movement. I know it kind of took a little bit of a lull for a while, but still getting those men to speak up, and then getting data and showing them, and then just keep trying. I think it's really, really difficult, to really break it. But once you do break it, you're making such a paved path for so many people after you. And the other thing too, and something that you said in my bio, and every time my bio is read, it's my favorite part, is talking about the emotional availability. I think with us having communities, whether it's, this webcast, whether it's PMG, or so many different circles that women have created to support one another, I think those circles allow us to be more emotionally available to continue to fight and to continue to have more resources and more of a movement of being together. And I think one of the things that we're going to start to see the results from is when I started Physician Moms Group, and then other, Facebook groups started after me as well. Some of them are larger, some of them, are smaller, but there's so many spaces that physicians are meeting in this, unconventional way. I think we have power now, because what used to happen before is, Palma, I would have never met you because I wouldn't have gone to the same conferences as you. And even if I did, the conference life is very sterile. Right. And it's kind of like a boys' world, it's like they're going to go out for a beer and they're going to go sit at, they're going to go for a golf tournament. I'm not saying that girls don't play golf, but it's all focused around male-driven hobbies and acceptable behavior, in this traditional society that men live in. And so what happens when they isolate people that are marginalized? If you're isolated, I'm isolated, how much power do we really have? Not much. So even when you make these women groups at these societies, that's great, but you're still functioning within their systemic power, right? So when I made Physician Moms Group, a lot of these organizations were really scared. And some of them reached out to me, what is your plan? What are you doing? And I didn't understand the gravity of what they were concerned about or what they were fearful of, but they were fearful of a revolt. Right. And so that just shows power in numbers. And if we're emotionally available to start mentoring other women, whether they're already vascular surgeons or mentoring the future ones, like the ones that think, oh my gosh, surgery is too hard. There's no way I can have a family if I choose to have a family, or live a life that, even if you don't want to have kids, just live a life that is fun and flexible, or whatever it may be that those, future colleagues of ours want. If you're more emotionally available to talk to them and encourage them to go in there, then we have more power in numbers. Then we have more camaraderie, and we have a group, a community that can actually fight against the powers that be.
Can you actually go into the social media aspect of this? Because it's exactly what you're saying. Vascular surgery, I love it. Linda loves it. We enjoy every aspect of it. It is taxing. It is hard. You cannot be weak. You have to be strong to do it. But we love it. Okay. And we are charged to do it and be successful. But the younger generation, they're worried. They're concerned. It's a different mindset. And, I think that social media can have a strong impact, whether it brings people into the fold or just deters them from coming. And backlash from younger generations being exposed to, the all-white male executive leadership, they're not going to be attracted to that environment. But social media plays a role. Do you think you could comment on that?
Yeah, first, I don't think their mindset is any different than our mindset. If we had a different mindset, there would be more than 16% women, or even if it's that high, in vascular surgery. So I think the difference between the younger generation is that they feel more comfortable saying like, I'm not doing that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just not going to do it. And you're like, no, please, like, we need more of you, right?
Yeah. No, you'll really enjoy it. It's really great. It's really great. And they're like, no.
Do it 3 times.
Like crying, you know? I promise, just come with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that, what does social media do? So I think social media, it's funny. When I was in medical school, I graduated in 2007. When I was the internet is, not that old, right? And although people who are watching this, some of them were like, I grew up with this, right? And so, when I was in medical school, that's when like kind of Facebook or MySpace, I think MySpace was out at the time.
MySpace, yeah.
And I remember we had we're all probably the same age, right? And so people are like, what's MySpace? So when we had that at that time, like I was too busy to deal with social media. I had tests, I like needed to pass, I needed all this stuff. And social media wasn't part of my life. It wasn't part of really anybody's life, really these early adopters at that time. And we had a lawyer that used to come and do malpractice talks. She was a lawyer and a nurse. She used to do malpractice talks for our medical school. And one time she came and the topic was social media. And basically what I got out of that lecture was social media is evil. It is really bad. Doctors do not belong on it. You're going to break HIPAA. You are going to ruin your reputation. And it is the equivalent, this is exactly what she said. It is the equivalent of showing up to a bar and drinking in your scrubs with your name embroidered on it and your badge hanging out. It is the most unprofessional, riskiest behavior that a physician can have. So that is what I initially thought social media was. And so when I made the group, you have to remember, I still had that mindset. So when I made the group, I thought I was basically going to have career suicide at that time. But because I was pushed to my edge and felt like I was given an ultimatum between my career and my family, I'm going to choose my family every single time. Mm-hmm. So I didn't care. So now, 8 years later, I don't think social media is viewed that same way. Now we see a lot of the helpful and dangerous parts of social media. We see all of it. But I think what social media offered was a really grassroots effort of organization, and before, this was done by phone calls and only doing it with local people that you can kind of get together. And now I literally have members over 100 countries that can get together. And although, our situation in the United States is maybe slightly unique in some ways, patriarchy is everywhere, right? So we have, physicians all over the world who are like, yeah, me too. We're all in this together. How do we collaborate? How do we maybe make this change for the whole world? So I think what social media has done is it's made our world smaller, where we all can communicate on a platform, and even in our own languages and translate it. Facebook has a translator for you. And then the second thing is that it kind of took off that white coat, that sterile organizational kind of feel of medicine. And it was like kind of like, okay, now this is kind of girl talk. This is, like the physician lounge if it was only for women, right? Mm-hmm. And, the news wasn't playing in the background, and people like complaining about what call they're taking. We're like, it's just women really talking about their lives and not being scared to be like, hey, I feel like I'm an imposter. I feel like I'm drowning, I feel like I'm a failure. I feel like I'm all these things, or this is my perceived failure at the time, or I'm having a good day, but I can't even share that because I don't want to come off too cocky or too confident or too whatever, right? Both ways we get it, right? You can't be too happy, you can't be too confident, and you can't be too on the other side of the spectrum. So I think social media has given a way for us to communicate that we never had before. And so it's really neat. And the different platforms, physician moms groups on Facebook, but what the other platforms have done too is allowed us really, I think Facebook does the best way of doing community growth, but other platforms have different benefits. And that's helped us rebrand what it looks like to be a doctor today and how we talk to patients. It's now not this like sterile, like authoritative, like I'm the doctor, you're the patient, you're going to always listen to me, I know better always. Now it's more of like, hey, how can we have shared decision making? How can we, if you do have an appetite for medical knowledge, let me teach you so you can better advocate for yourself. Let me fight misinformation by giving you the real accurate information, right? And so there's been a lot of that. And I think it's an uphill battle, but at least it's there and we're able to be part of it. And so I'm glad now that we see so many physician influencers, we see a lot of physician voices and personalities out there and groups to support them all.
Well, we have a ton of questions coming in, so I'll start with some of them.
Okay.
So Hala, since pushing through your situation, have you noticed any positive changes in your wake?
Oh, everything. Like, I can't even imagine. I mean, I'm so glad that happened to me because I don't think I would be the doctor I am today. I don't think I would be the mom I am today, the wife, the friend. I'm so much nicer to myself, which ultimately is the best win. I mean, I'm not kidding when I would think that I want to quit every day, and I was so mean to myself. You know, the things that I would say, I would never say that to somebody else. You know, so I think that this whole process of growth, I mean, there's a lot that I'm not sharing too that happened behind the scenes. You know, this all happened so fast, and there was a lot of people that were in spaces that supported me and knew what I was going through. That were not in medicine. Like, for example, I'll just give you one example. One of my first meetings with Facebook executives, they had asked me, this is like, what, 2015 maybe? I don't know, a long time ago. And they were like, you know, how are you doing? And I was like, you know, fine. They're like, no, how are you really doing? Because community management, community organizations, like, it's rough. And I'm like, I know. I feel like I'm going to make a fatal emotion every single day and it's all going to go away. And I feel like this like immense responsibility and I don't know what I'm doing. I would rather run 20 codes instead of like dealing with an online fight because I know how to do the codes really well. And what do I do? And he was like, hey, slow down. And he was like, I'll help you. And so a lot of things happened after that. But one of the things that they did for me was they had me meet with this amazing gentleman named Jeremy. And I didn't know him at the time, but I was having breakfast with him at an event that I was representing Facebook at. And I told him, he's like, you know, how's it going? And I was like, oh, you know, it's just crazy the amount of pressure I'm under, you know, X, Y, and Z. And he's like, oh yeah, he's like, community organizations like hard. It's kind of like, you know, what Obama did. And I was like, I've never been compared to Barack Obama, but sure. And I know he was a community organizer, but I don't think I really understood or made that connection. And I was like, yeah, that's so funny. I never really thought about that. I just thought he maybe owned a YMCA or two or something. Like, I didn't know what he did. Mm-hmm. And he starts laughing and he was like, I'm going to tell him. And I was like, what do you mean you're going to tell him? And he was like, oh, I'm his national field director. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, okay, insert foot in mouth. But after that, he was like, I was connected with you because I heard that you're kind of overwhelmed and you want some guidance, but you're doing an amazing job. And he was like, I'm here to teach you. And so we did a 6-month program where he taught me everything that I was actually doing already, just to, you know, more, and then also how to do it better and have less like personal feelings attached to it and things like that, you know. And then I was able to teach him what I was doing so they can continue to do things. I mean, he doesn't work for Obama anymore, or I don't know if they do, but he has a whole company that does consulting for politicians and stuff. But how can they continue to do community organization online? Like, what are the best tools to communicate online? Because before they used to do it by phone calls and by mailers and by town halls, right? So it was really neat to have that. And so I think for me, the opportunities I've had for my self-growth and to connect with other people who are doing amazing things outside of medicine and to figure out where that commonality lies, and for them to have interest in what I'm doing because they know that health is the foundation of anything else that we do in this nation, has been really, really exciting and really energizing for me. So that's a really long-winded answer, and I don't even know if I answered your question, but it's changed me a lot. And I think that that I hope that my story inspires anyone listening to make those bold moves, even when you're feeling scared to do that.
Well, that's excellent advice. Their questions are coming in. So this question is about, talking about, you had mentioned, get the men to speak up too, right? Mm-hmm. So have you noticed what attracts men more towards the movement?
I mean, I think, there are men that are just progressive in a lot of their thoughts, or they say the right things, and sometimes they just need a little guidance. A lot of them are a little bit scared that they're going to do the wrong thing. I mean, they already feel that at home, especially if they're in a marriage or a partnership with a woman. A lot of them are like, gosh, whatever I say to my wife, like, it's wrong, so they'd rather not say anything. But then if you don't say anything, then you basically side with the oppressor, right? And so just kind of telling them and like giving them encouragement. And then for even when guys are saying something not exactly the right way, really like helping them and coaching them and, being their mentors, which is a very different situation for us usually, because usually we have men as mentors, not women mentoring men. But I think it's a partnership. So I think just even talking to them, and if you know those men who are secretly low-key feminists, maybe even ask them, what are you scared of? And then you can help them overcome their perceived obstacles, but you can't make someone do something that they don't want to do, but you can make people comfortable and you can support them in doing what they think is right. I mean, I think it's funny because a lot of these same people, whether it's a man or a woman, we feel really passionate when we're talking about patients. Like how many of us like talk about the disparities of health in this country. We're like, oh yes, we need to make sure that, our Black and brown patients, like that they have X, Y, and Z. But those same people who will say that and they'll quote data, right? How many of them are posting about Juneteenth today or yesterday? How many of them feel comfortable going, hey, this murder was wrong, right? And why is that different? Why is advocating for patients different than advocating for a social justice cause that's outside of medicine? Although I see them as the same personally. I think it's your true value set. And if you really truly believe what you're saying, then you'll show up with that same energy in every situation that, that requires it to. So I think, sometimes it's just more of just making those men understand and kind of feel comfortable with whatever their goals are. And maybe they don't feel as strongly as you think that they do. And maybe they do, and they're just a little bit scared and timid, and they just need a little bit of hand holding, even though they won't admit that.
And then how do you weigh having a family with your career, as busy as you are?
It's funny. I think I had to decide, like, what do I want my life to look like? I think when we have this discussion, it's more like, okay, like it's a balance, right? I don't like using the word balance because nothing's ever balanced. I mean, look at any lab result that we order. If you order like a hemoglobin A1C, like it's a range, right? Because there's no such thing as a one number that's normal, right? And so I think for me, I started thinking like, instead of trying to figure out what the right balance of my life, okay, if I work 2 days and then I'm home 3 days, or like what, like that was just confusing to me. And I was like, wait, what do I really want? And I think until I answered that question, like, what do I want my life to look like? Then only could I really figure out what the right formulation going into that. So for example, I look back at my values. For anyone that has been following any of my work over the last 5 years, I've been talking a lot about values. And someone asked me one time, like, what are your values? And I said, my family, my career, and my health. And they were like, those are not values. And I felt so dumb. I was like, how could I be almost 40 and not know what a value is? Like, I feel like that's just like a thing that we should know. So I actually went down this like rabbit hole, read so many books, like went down this rabbit hole, like what are values? What do I want my values to be? What are they now? What do I strive for them to be? How can I work on them? And so my values, like just to name the top 3, is innovation, love, and knowledge. So I was like, okay, what does innovation look like in my career? What does innovation look like with my money? What does innovation look like with my family? What does innovation look like with my friendships, with my spirituality? Those are the ways that you express your values. So I was naming vessels that we express our values through. So I started just like really going down deep into this like rabbit hole of like, okay, if I know that I feel balanced when I'm living a values-based life, then what are my values? So now like, it's so easy for me. Because I'm like, okay, I want innovation, I want love, I want knowledge, I want inspiration. There's about 4 or 5 that I actively work on. And so I literally write down, like, what does that look like in different parts of my life? And I do just that. And so now it's not about how many days of the week I'm working or how many hours. It's not about that at all. It's, am I being true to myself and fulfilling my role? And obviously, if there's a little bit more to that, I mean, it's like, I need to make money, right? So it's like, okay, how much money do I want to make? And, you start to build it that way. But I think for me, I mean, I have 5 kids, so I think for me, I just really wanted to build a career that I can continue to innovate. Like, I love innovation so much. And I think that's the part of business I liked, that I really wanted to go into business. If I look back to like my early days, I used to work for the Disney company. And some of the projects I would be working on is more innovation. Like, how could we solve this problem? And it was just like really cool to me to like figure out using resources that we had to create, to create solutions. And so I love that now. And that's what PMG is such a testament to. It's like, how do we create the solution of women not talking together? Or how do we correct, parental leave? Or now I'm going to address the wage gap. That's my next big thing that I want to do, is addressing the wage gap and really putting pressure, getting that data, like I mentioned earlier, Palma, getting that data and putting pressure and giving that data to every single person so it's transparent, right? Allowing them to arm themselves and not have to depend on MGMA data, which is faulty in itself, and it's behind like all this red tape and costs $6,000 and all this other stuff. So,
Yeah,
so
what
I think
is
for
that?
me, it's a way to oppress people, right?
Yeah.
And it works. To say, this is your market value. And I'm like,
Yeah, but where'd you get
what?
that? In order to get that, I have to be an institution and spend thousands of dollars to get the report. Yeah.
We can do a whole nother segment on this whole thing.
I know,
I promise
really.
you, like, it is so maddening, because I never knew what MGMA data was, because I work in community medicine. But when I found out, I was like, this, and from an objective point of view, because I'm outside of that system, I was like, this is BS, right? But I also don't work in here's the thing. I created my own company, right? So I innovate and consult for, huge companies. I work for hospital systems as, a per diem physician, but I'm not bound by any kind of contract, right? Like, so it allows me to continue to innovate. Like, nobody will ever own my intellectual property. I mean, I have a lawyer that deals with all that for me, So I think for me, I have that freedom to continue to learn and innovate. And I'm an asset to the companies who hire me, whether it's for consulting or it's for me being a clinical physician there. I am an asset for them. So I think it works, hand in hand. But I think going back to kind of what the question was, like, well, how did I decide to like create my life? How do I do this with 5 kids? And I think for me, I just fill my time that I am going to work with the most valuable work that I want to do, whether that's in clinical medicine, like where I'm going to work, or if it's I'm taking a consultation job, or I'm throwing a conference, or whatever it is. I make sure that I just really love what I'm doing, because then it doesn't really feel like work. It truly doesn't. And one of the decisions I made about a year and a half ago or so was I really wanted to be more present with my kids. That doesn't mean not work. That doesn't mean be home all the time. That means be present with my kids when I am home, right? And so I make sure that I'm home by 5 every day. That's just a decision I made for myself. It doesn't mean it's right for anyone else. But it's funny, because this has been going on for about a year and a half or 2 years. And I tell this story because I think it's so funny. So my kids they're about to be 9, 2 7-year-olds and 2 almost 4-year-olds. And a couple of months ago, my mother-in-law was home, and she kind of had a little bit of like nasal congestion. This woman will complain about nasal congestion, but she doesn't want to take medicine. So I just went to the pharmacy and I bought a couple of things, come home, and I tell her, I'm like, hey, this medicine, this is the mechanism of action. This medicine, this is the mechanism of action, like choose one, right? So my son is laying on the bed, he's 7, and he's like, Mom, like, how do you know that? And I was like, well, know what? He's like, how this medicine works. I'm like, well, I'm a doctor. And he starts laughing. He's like, no way, you're not a doctor. I never see you go to the hospital. I never see you wearing like a white coat. And it's so funny that his reality is so warped, because I do work in a hospital and I do go to work, but he just doesn't really notice it at all. Not that I'm hiding it from them, but because I'm so present with them, and the things that I do with them, it's so impactful. Like, I'm not this overwhelmed, overtired mom all the time now, being like, yeah, kid, just get away from me. That's how I used to be. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That was just survival mode for me. And if you're in survival mode, that's totally cool. But if you want to stay there, that's fine. But I just didn't want to stay there anymore. And I was ready to move out. And so for me, like, I'm just loving, everything I'm doing every step of the way, but I'm not with my kids all the time. I have it, I have help. I'm not with my kids right now. I'm not even in the same state as them, but their perception is I'm with them all the time. And so that's really, really super fun.
So one viewer says she never knew the difference between what you said, the vessels of expressing your value and values. So can you talk more about defining a value?
Yeah. And if anyone's listening and you guys don't know this, like I didn't know this until a couple of years ago. So like, please, like, don't think that this is like common knowledge. But basically there's 6 main avenues in our life. There is our health, our career, our money, our spirituality, our romantic relationships, and our other relationships with friends and family. So those are the 6. And anything that we do falls into those 6, vessels. Some people, they care more about about certain avenues than others. And I find that at least with myself and, because I do coaching, I do an intake with all of my clients, and they're very much like me, where they really focus a lot on their money and their career. And then they ignore everything else, or they keep it at just a bare minimum, and that was my life. So if this is you too, like, believe me, we're all in this together. So those are the vessels that we express our values through. Now, values are much different. Values are words or belief systems that we have it's like our instruction manual of how we operate, right? So like what really feels good to me is to be in a place of innovation. I love creating new things, right? I just love that. So when I'm in a job or when I'm in a situation that I feel bored or stagnant or frustrated with, oftentimes it's because there's no innovative piece to it. I just know that about myself, and that's unique to me, right? So when I started looking at my values and the options I had, and there's values assessment tools all over the internet, but I was so confused by so many of them that I made my own. So if you want to go to my website, you can download it. It's completely free. It's drhalasabry.com, and it comes up as, do you want a values, workbook? And you can download that. And I kind of go over how to pick your values, how to focus on a few of them, and then how to define how that looks like in different avenues of your life. So there's like a list. I think I have like 100 values, but you literally can look at so many different other words that can, or you can combine words to make it a value. But for me, I picked a couple that I mentioned, like knowledge, love, inspiration, innovation. And I just really focus on them. So basically those are the values that you pick of kind of what's your makeup, like what's the makeup of what defines Hala, what defines Palma, right? What defines Linda, and what makes her tick, what makes her happy, what makes her content, what makes her have purpose in life, right? And for each one of us, that will be a little bit different, and then you look at all of the vessels that I mentioned, the 6, and it's like questioning yourself, how am I exercising knowledge in this realm? How am I exercising inspiration? How am I exercising? So I actually, with my clients, I challenge them to write 10 ways, and they don't have to be big. They don't have to be big at all, but they have to be something. Because what happens, in my opinion, is that when you're like, gosh, I'm just not happy, right? We've all done this probably, right? You're like in a job and you're like, gosh, I'm not happy. I feel burnt out, because we don't have any other terminology. I mean, you might be burnt out, but I think burnout is like a very vague term. A lot of people use it, even if they're not burned out. They just like, burnout is just an easier way to say, like, I'm exhausted, tired, frustrated, I want to give up. Although burnout is real. But I just want to do something different. Is this all I'm going to do all my life? Right? I feel like a cog in a wheel. I feel like I'm in a hamster wheel of life and I can't get off, or else I'm going to fall out, right? Or whatever it may be. When you start asking yourself those questions, there's true entities called mid-career crisis. There's also midlife crisis. But I think that what they're doing is you're kind of questioning your values. Like, what am I doing? What is my purpose here? And I think if you truly love your purpose, and you truly love what you're doing and the impact that you're having, whether that's on your family or at your job or on the world, then that's when you actually find happiness and balance. So I personally really advocate for values-based living. But basically that's what I did. I went back to my values, figured out what my values were, and then I just made sure that everything I was doing was really in alignment. So let me give you an example. This will make it a little bit more clear. I was working for a company. I was doing consulting work for them for a year. Consulting work, for anybody that has ever done it, it's really demanding. It's really, really difficult. I really liked this company. And at the end of the year, they were like, actually, we don't want you as a consultant anymore. We want to bring you on as a full-time employee. Now, this is like usually any consultant's dream, right? But I looked at the job and it sounded like if they would have offered me this like 5 years ago, I would have been like, I hit the jackpot. Like this was like the most amazing job. But when I looked at the job and I started asking questions, like, does this fulfill the knowledge, inspiration, all the things that I'm looking at? It didn't. It just didn't. It was a very transactional role, which I felt like that's why I was so frustrated with medicine. Like nobody wants their ER doctor or their surgeon going, hey, I have this great idea of how to do this new thing. Like they're like, no, just stick with what you got. Like just move the meat, do your charts. Let's get out of here, right? And so for me, it was really clear, even though this job opportunity offered a lot of money, a good title, was a great company that I would love to work for. It just wasn't the right thing for me. And so I actually, with no hesitation and no sadness or FOMO or whatever, I was able to say no. Because I knew even if I was happy in the first 6 months or year, I knew I was setting myself up for failure, because I knew eventually my values would not be honored. And I'm not going to compromise my values anymore, because I know what that does for me. It just creates unhappiness and it creates, anger, and I don't live my best life, and I don't create impact that I want to have. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'm going to go on the website and actually figure out I guess I feel where you were before you knew all this. Like, I'm like, I don't know I don't even know what values you could pick from to figure out, and maybe that's what you're saying is you just need to put out, save some time in your life to figure out what you want and really, like look internally inside yourself to decide what makes you happy. Because sometimes we're so busy, we just sort of go through life like, just doing everything and not really focusing on, okay, wait, let me stop, let me take a minute, let me figure out what is right for me and evaluate like every part of my life, and am I living that to the fullest?
Yeah, we've been asked, and we continue to ask, like kids as young as like 3 or 2 years old, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? It's like we're like trying to get them to goal set, right? And that's completely fine. I'm not telling you not to do that, but we're asking the wrong question. We're asking, what do you want to be when you grow up versus how do you want your life to look like? How do you want to live your life? That is a very different question. And I think what happens is we set up, and this is probably the story of all of us watching this, right? Like we have had an agenda for a very long time. Either it's agenda that we made, right? I want to be a doctor, and then I want to be a vascular surgeon, or I want to be an ER doctor. And it was set out for you. You had to go to high school, then college, then medical school, then residency, then fellowship. Then you get out and you're stuck in this vacuum since you were like 15 years old or something. And you don't even have a chance to really reflect and be like, who the hell am I now? You get spit out and you're 30, right? And then it's like, okay, now go. And then you have other people telling you what to do, right? Like hospital CEOs, like what I wanted to be, right? Like, hey, like you got to move the meat, you got to make money, right? You want to be partner. So you want to be partner, right? Like, then this is what you got to do. This carrot on the stick, right? And it's funny because I was part of that. I was like, yeah, I want to be partner. I want to do anything to be like more stable, right? And now, like, now I have no interest in that stuff, So now they can dangle all that in front of my face, and now I want to be like, hey, like, what is your policy on X, Y, and Z? How is your relationship with the patients? Like, how much time do you have with patients? Like, I want to understand X, Y, and Z, and which will be different for emergency medicine than vascular surgery. But I get to like be choosy, and I get to be picky, because I'm not motivated by these other things. And you could still make a killing, and you could still make all the money that you want, right? But you make it how you want it, and not because of what you think is available to you or what you think you have to do just because other people are telling you that. Just like my world was small, thinking to be having the most impact in the world, I had to be a hospital CEO. I couldn't even tell you the CEO names for the hospitals I do work at. So, sorry if they're watching.
Yeah.
I don't know their names.
We did a show on CEOs also. We've done one of that. And they're amazing. But, I think it's important. You've gone through so many phases, and sometimes there are women that they're struggling. I mean, I've struggled when I was a single mother raising my son by myself, vascular surgeon. Money was tight in Boston, very expensive place. Salary didn't go far because it was, you're academic, so you don't get paid the big bucks, these things. And I think it's hard when sometimes you're really in a phase you just truly can't do what you're saying. You just can't move for 3 years. Like, you can't make that change. And I think the hard part is holding it together, getting through that phase so you could take that next step. So I don't know if you can comment on.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's parts of my life. I mean, look, there's parts of my life that I'm like, I have to grin and bear it for these, 2 years before I could do this next thing. The difference is that I think now in this phase of my thought process, and also I'm 11 years out from residency, so I might be in a whole different situation than some people watching. But my thought process now is like, this is just part of the plan, right? This is part of my bigger plan. This is not an end all. I don't feel stuck, right? Even in positions I don't like, I'm like, okay, what don't I like about it? Let me figure out, because if I go pick something else, how do I know I'm not just picking the same thing that just looks a little different? So that's what I'm challenging everyone to do, right? Is, just understand what don't you like. I have a client, I was actually just coaching her this morning. She's an academic, and she was having some problems with her institution and whatever it may be. And she didn't want to leave academics, but she was so scared to pick a new role because she thought it would just all be the same. So we were able to really understand. So when she goes to negotiate her contract, she knows what she's negotiating for, whether she's staying with the same institution or going to a new one, So now she has everything and more than she ever wanted. And she's still, kind of practicing how she wants and making just a little bit more money, right? But then she's happier and she gets to live through her values and do all these things, right? And so I think ultimately your happiness could look so different. It may not look like what I have, right? And it, whatever it may be. But I think ultimately, if you don't like your situation, that doesn't mean you have to change it. It's more of just understanding what about it do you want it to change? Because maybe not much of it has to change at all. It's more of just understanding, what are your values? Are you really just ignoring other parts of your life that you need to lean in on? Or is it there's something really wrong with the situation that you're fixated on? Because I used to do that. When something would go wrong at my work, my whole life would crumble, right? And mainly it wasn't because work was a problem. It's because I had nothing else to back onto. Like, my family life kind of sucked. I had sacrificed so many friendships, I felt so stressed out about money. I lived in money scarcity, so many things, right? And so when the one thing that was
going good,
kind of my success, right?
Yeah.
When that would falter, my whole life would shatter, And so you don't even have to change your job. I think it's just really understanding, where that success life balance is, right? Looking at all of the different avenues that you express your values, and just making sure that you're being true to yourself. And sometimes that doesn't mean changing, a situation that you're fixated on, like your job. Sometimes it's, just really reinforcing and providing resources for the other parts that you're really ignoring. So, I mean, everybody's different. There's not one solution for this problem. But, I went through this. The reason why I started doing this work is because every day I would tell myself I want to quit. Like, I wanted to run away from everything. I thought the solution to all my problems was if I won the lottery for it couldn't even be $1 million, because $1 million wasn't enough. It had to be like 10 million or more, right? So I was like, I just need to win $10 million and all my problems will be solved. I won't work anymore. All my problems are going to magically go away. But if you watch those millionaire shows where they win the $1 million, have you guys ever watched them?
No, but I mean, you always hear about how they've like all these family members come out of the woodworks like asking for money, and then they end up like bankrupt or something in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, none of them actually live that life that we have of that escapism in our brain.
Yeah.
So it's not, money is just a circumstance. I'm not saying that money is not important. I'm not saying that, but being fixated like how I was, I just need to win $10 million. I just need this one side gig just to take off, right? Like whatever it may be, right? I'm going to start investing so I don't have to work anymore. Whatever that is, if you think that you're going to change your circumstances and your thoughts are going to magically just change, that's not exactly how it works, So, and that's like the same premise I'm saying with equity. We're not going to just change the circumstance of having more women in medicine and voila, wage gap is going to go away. No, we're just going to have more people with wage gap. Like that's all we're going to do, right? And so I think it's more of changing our thoughts and addressing our thoughts about it. And really, those thoughts create our feelings fuel our actions or lack of, and that creates our result. And so for me, I think a couple of years ago, like I was saying, I wanted to quit everything. I thought winning $10 million would change my whole life. It would solve everything. I was hitting a really, really hard time. I was in my third pregnancy. I was not expecting to have twins again. I did not want to have twins again. I was very depressed about it. My mom had just gotten diagnosed with cancer right before I was pregnant, like 3 weeks before. And I ended up losing her when I was 5 months pregnant. And right after I had those kids, I turned 40. So I call that the trifecta of what kind of caused my breakdown. I mean, I was already kind of like chugging along before then, and I had already created PMG, and this is so funny. I created PMG and I was okay for probably about a year. And that's just like the idea of changing a circumstance. Okay, well, now I have more women to tell me how crappy medicine is, right? That's great. But after a while, it's like, okay, like now what am I going to do, right? It doesn't really solve my problems. It doesn't solve a lot of the things that I was thinking of that time. And so, so finally I get to this point where, I just want to quit everything. I want to shut down PMG. I want to run away to a very cheap area, not even an island, because that's probably really expensive, some cheap area, win $10 million and just live in solitude, which is not going to solve anything. But that's what I wanted to do. And when I got to that part and I had a therapist and I was doing all the things, and my therapist was just kind of like, I mean, she's so sweet and so nice and so amazing, but she was kind of like, you're okay. I think you're just like kind of having first world problems. You're just kind of creating these problems for yourself. And that's when I kind of got into like the personal development. I started listening to a lot of podcasts, reading a lot of books. I hired actually a life coach secretly because I was like, I think these life coaches are quacks. Like, this sounds weird. I don't know what that is, and then until I hired one and understood, like, I think a therapist, and I still see a therapist and I still have a life coach. So nothing's changed, but I feel like a therapist helps you. Like if you're driving to a destination, a therapist is kind of like your rear view mirror, right? Looks behind you, make sure nothing's going to creep up on you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Helps you when you're making some move side to side. Sometimes you can look at it and help you, right? Coach is like looking through a windshield. Where are you going? Like, do you need to like scrape off the ice? Do you need to put on your windshield wipers? Like, do you need to clean it? Like, what do you need to do to see more clearly to get to your destination? And so for me, like, I think that was like the biggest help. And for me, just to see my own thoughts and feelings, figure out where I really wanted to go with this. And then I ended up kind of delving more into the education of life coaching. I actually went to life coach certification school because I wanted to be a consultant. And I wanted to hear my clients and my patients eventually like my coach heard me. I was like, why do I not have the skill set that they have? Like, what kind of Jedi mind trick do they have that I don't, And it was funny because when I went through the schooling, one of the first days they're like, introduce yourself and talk about what kind of life coaching you want to do. And I was like, I don't want to coach anyone. I just want to learn this, They were like, that's weird. Mm-hmm. And then after I got out, I started realizing like, a couple of years ago, I would have never made these changes. And so one of the things that I hope, whether people are my clients or they're just hearing me talk or they follow my Facebook, my Facebook copy and whatever, my posts and things like that, as I want them to learn, because it was so influential for me. It just changed my life so much that I was able to get to this part. And I didn't learn everything from life coaching. I had to do self-discovery, and I put it all together in ways for me to teach other people. And this is only one way that worked for me. And there's other coaches out there that will work for you and things like that. But ultimately, like, I knew something had to change. And I think our mindset, which has been so socialized in a patriarchal society that oppresses women, especially women of color, I think that it's an uphill battle, right? Especially when you work in a male-dominated field and you're being told all the time that you're never going to be good enough. You have to work twice as good as a man for you to be somewhat equal, and it's just tiring. So for me, I think that this evolution over the last 5 years, you guys are seeing the end result of that. And I mean, I'm on a continuum. I'm going to continue to grow, but this is not where I started 5 years ago. I was in complete survival mode, never saw a way out, wanted to quit every single day, needed to win the lottery to survive in my brain. And none of those things happened. but here I am to tell my story. So, but yeah, I don't know if we talked a lot about social media, but social media was a big part of it. And I hope that you guys will, have fun with communicating on social media and being supported by these groups.
Well,
this was amazing.
Yeah. I mean, we're going past time, but I mean, what a success story. And especially since, Palma and I are part of the WhatsApp, part of the solution. I mean, really, you were one of the pioneers to just, like you said, in your selfish reasons, but it became an altruistic group for everyone. And so other specialties are copying what you're doing, and we hope that we kind of keep the movement going and get somewhere. Like you said, I mean, we have to change their, people's cognitive, like just how people think, or else we're not going to change.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not all thought work. I mean, we can't just sit there and think optimistically and be like, hey, I really want to manifest this change and things are going to change. But I think it's like a mixture. I mean, just like with patients, right? Like you guys were talking about right before we started, we're talking about, vascular and, feet and dead feet that, Palma has on her phone.
Well, we keep them alive. That's our job. We keep them alive. We keep them from dying.
I mean, but to support a limb to be alive, there's so many factors, right? You have to give medication, possibly surgery, right? Wound care, physical therapy, right? Yeah. There's so many factors.
Emotional support.
Emotional support, right? To keep that foot alive, right? And so I think that there's so many factors to really support women in male-dominated fields, and social support groups, community support groups, coaching for our mindset. There's been some great journal JAMA articles recently on coaching, especially for residents, and how that's helped decrease their burnout and their exhaustion. So you're hearing my story, but there's data out there for hundreds of other people, So I think it's just one tool. So social support, community support, professional support, the mindset work, all of these things together, and then pushing on policy to change to make it more equitable and more fair. So there's so many things here that we could be doing, and there's room for everybody. So if any of you guys are listening, want to do something, just don't think, oh, Hala's already done it. Or Palma's doing it right now, or Linda's, she's got it. She's probably going to do it. Or I'll just tell her to do it, and she's going to do it much faster. No, this is going to take all of us. It's like we need like an army of women, that are prepared to support each other in every which way that they can, to overcome this big battle. So I think that I'm going to be part of people's story, but I hope that I'm just setting up a foundation that is, I felt like my father handed me the baton. And I want to be able to hand the next generation a baton that, is a little bit, a little bit more robust, that they don't have to do so much work.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and taking time out of your busy schedule.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody appreciate. I didn't even get to all these questions, Palma, but
my God,
we'll have to.
I can't see the questions.
I know.
So
well,
if anybody wants to send them to me, send them to me.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back next year then.
Well, we'll do one on the gap, the wage gap.
Yes.
We'd love to have you talk about that.
Yeah, when we're about to launch our our study's done. I think we're just trying to perfect it, because we want to make sure we get it right the first time.
Yes.
So,
next year.
When we get back to this, we'll do a study on that. We'll do an episode on that. I think there was something else that we were talking about too. I don't know. I mean, we could talk about anything, you guys.
Right.
But if anyone's watching, I know we could talk about. I think I've had individual conversations with both of you that have lasted more than an hour, so we could talk about anything. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. There's a contact me part on my website, or you can email me. My email is hala_sabry@yahoo.com. So feel free. And Palma, and hopefully Linda, you're going to be at my conference in August. I'd love to see you guys in person.
Come to Kiowa.
Yeah, Kiowa.
Sisterhood from Kiowa.
Yes, August 5th through 7th. Let's go walk on the beach together.
We're going on the road.
Yeah, that'll be fun. We should tape from there. We should do that.
We should. Yeah. We could do that.
Well, the media team, maybe Methodist will pay for all of y'all to go. Hey.
Yeah.
Alan will go. Maybe Alan will come.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure he would.
To the women's meeting.
Yeah.
Hey, there's men that show up to our meeting. We
Yeah.
had a couple of men register, especially partners. Like, some women are, that they're there, they bring their partners and they'll register.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
thank you so much.
Can't wait to see you there. Nice seeing you
All
guys.
right.
Good
Good night.
Amazing as always.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me, you guys. Thank you.
Bye.
It was our pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.